different countries all across the world, the history with regards to it. Once again, we are now on part 4 of the country Tunisia. We've already spoken a lot in the previous days. Today we're going to take a short break with regards to the order. We're at the moment up to World War II, that time period in of itself, and just before then, well, we're going to speak today about the various different famous synagogues there was all throughout different times in Tunisia. Explore it. What were the famous synagogues there? There's a long list of synagogues. I haven't been able to get. There's a lot of information out there within regards to it, but we are going to do our best to get like just a small taster of the synagogues. I think there were many hundreds of synagogues and yeshivot and different Torah institutions over there. Now, obviously, the most famous synagogue there is in Tunisia is the El Khriba synagogue. I think it's also known as the Jerba synagogue. Remember, Jerba had one of the greatest Torah Jewish communities in of its day. I think it's located in the Jewish village of Hara Sehira, also known as the Reida, if I'm not mistaken. And the synagogue appears to be one of the oldest synagogues inside the world. I think it's, let's just say, the rite of the synagogue itself is from the Maghrebi Tochavim community. And it's actually located in Riyadh in Jerba, respectively, over there. And it's actually listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, if I'm not mistaken. According to one opinion, it's got a Moorish, it was established in 6th century BCE. The architecture itself was, and it's a Moorish style, we have to point out over here. I think it's, let's say, at the center of the island of Jerba's Jewish life. It was a synagogue. It was also a Jewish site of pilgrimage, and it was extensively renovated in the 19th century. We have to point out over there. One of the legends associated with its founding claims that either a stone or door from Shlomo HaMelech's temple, the second Bet HaMikdash, is incorporated inside the building. We have to point out over here. And I think El Khriba is the most famous of the 20 synagogues that were being used until the 1950s in the 3 villages of Jerba. And unfortunately, I think it was target of terrorist attacks in 1985, 2002, also 2023. So we know that currently Jerba is a home of 1,300 Jews, I believe, or quite recently. At one point in time, there was many thousands of Jews living there. Now, according to a legend, the construction of the synagogue dates to the high priest's escape from the destruction of Shlomo HaMelech's temple by the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar. We're talking about many 2,000 plus years ago. The high priest carried with him a door and a stone of the destroyed Bet HaMikdash. Thus, the synagogue links the Jewish diaspora, the sole sanctuary of Judaism. I think in modern times, local Jews are distinguished by their dress, which includes a black band around their pants, which signifies the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, respectively. Yeah. According to somewhere else, another source, actually just reading from Wikipedia, there's a tradition that claims that maybe the synagogue was built on the spot where a young girl, or you could say a Griba, the isolated one, had lived, that had not been accepted by others. She died, and her, let's say, uncropped body, just using terminology here of Wikipedia, was found by the Jews of the nearby village and then buried in a cave, which became the site of an annual pilgrimage for Lag BaOmer, which is on the 18th of Iyar. The synagogue was built over here, end of 19th century, at the spot where the 6th century building had stood. On the outside, the current synagogue is a modest building, it's described with. And let's say the interior is richly decorated. In contrast to the other synagogues of Jerba, El Khriba consists of 2 covered halls, several structural extensions. First of 2 halls, I think, was built through the roofing of a formerly open courtyard in order to let it increase the capacity of worshippers, people that are coming there to pray. The hall is connected to the main hall by 3 vaults, reported over. At the side, there's 2 columns supporting a high skylight of numerous windows. You can see architecturally, it is brilliant. I think later renovations will bring further windows added over there. The north side was modified. The teva, the cupboard of the Torah, located under the skylight. And it's I think there's wooden benches over there. And inner walls are decorated with ceramic tiles resembling, let's say, the Quailin tiles, painted in green, yellow, blue, and brown. There's great decorative inside of it also. And I think a recess under the Holy Ark marks the spot where the body of this girl who we just mentioned about is supposed to have been found. And it is known as the Cave of the Girl, I believe, over here. A pilgrimage reported over takes place every year on the 33rd day of the Omer, Lag BaOmer. On the 14th of Iyar, the festivities begin in remembrance of the famous Tana Rabbi Meir Bel Hanes, and last until Lag BaOmer in remembrance of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, sadly, I think it was target of several terrorist attacks. This place was. I think in 1985, 3 people were killed, including 1 child, and 15 people were wounded during the festival of Simchat Torah. And I think it was a local policeman responsible for guarding the synagogue fired into a crowd of celebrating Jews, and the attack was in response to, let's say, Operation Wooden Leg, when Israel targeted the PLO headquarters in Tunisia, if I'm not mistaken. A local policeman whose relative was killed in the operation targeted the synagogue, I think, reports over in a wave of anti-Jewish sentiment following this specific operation. Over here, I think there was a further in April 2002, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just going to move location at the moment over here, just to get a better location to actually record this video. I just was in a spot where there was a lot of wind over there, just a little bit lower down, but I'm just going to move the seat. I'll be just half a minute, friends, over here. Hi, shalom everyone. We are exploring the history of the Tunisian Jewish community here on this special edition. So anyone, if you're new to the channel, welcome to our community. So we know in 2002, I think there was a truck full of, just table here is not the best. Yeah. It's a very wobbly tape. Okay, so I think it was in 2002, April of that specific month. I think there was a truck full of, I don't know, it's just a very, very bad table I've got here. It's like, I think it's fixable. Okay. Yeah, so I think it was in April 2002, a truck full of explosives was detonated close to the synagogue, if I'm not mistaken, which killed 21 people, among them 14 German terrorists, 5 Tunisians and 2 French nationals. And May 2023, a member of the Tunisian National Guard violently attacked Jewish worshippers outside the synagogue, shooting and killing 2 Jewish cousins. One of the men, a French tourist and a Tunisian citizen living in Netivot in Israel, and 8 others were injured over there. You can see the anti-Semitism that actually has taken place. I think the synagogue is supervised by an independent administration committee that was established at the end of the 19th century, when Gerba was a French protectorate. The administration committee organizes the annual pilgrimages and distributes the pilgrimage revenue to the village elders of it. Now let's go through a list of the synagogues in various different places. I'll just be 1 minute, friends, and we will continue. Okay, yeah, we're just going to continue over here. Sorry about the delay over there. Let's look at the list of the various different synagogues that are actually in Gerba, which we have to point out. Now, there are many, many areas over there, and there's an excellent list here on Wikipedia. So we're talking about the Ariana area in of itself. We're going to go through the list of areas, speak about a few of the synagogues, and maybe about some of the rabbis over there. So in Ariana, the first one is the El Echriba synagogue over there. Then there's another one called the Menachem Zaytun synagogue. Remember, Zaytun was a rabbinic family name. It happened to have been in Tunisia. The Samuel Zaytun synagogue, I assume he was a rabbi also. I don't know if that was the actual name of the synagogue or that was the name of the rabbi. And then there was the Nino Ben Attar synagogue also. That's the next one on the list. The Quaid Abraham synagogue. The Rabbi Chaim Chemani synagogue. Another famous rabbi, I think. Rabbi Chai Kohen synagogue. Bet Abram Soria synagogue. That's the next one on the list. The Chutab Kisroi synagogue. That's the next one on the list here. And also inside the area there was, as we said before, the Salomon Lombroso synagogue. Remember, we spoke about the famous Lombroso family. Beforehand, it was a rabbinic family also. And the Rubin Azulay synagogue. Azulay being a very more popular Moroccan name, I would have thought, actually. But that's very, very interesting. And then in the Beja district, there's the Rabbi Fraji synagogue over there. There's a great synagogue, the Fitoussi synagogue. And I think there was a famous Rabbi Fitoussi, if I'm not mistaken, which we've spoken about before. The Tubiani synagogue in Beja. the Bobli and Levi synagogue over there. So I haven't got much information on all these synagogues that I'm mentioning about. Feles Sarfati synagogue. Remember, the Sarfati family happened to be a famous rabbinic family at that point in time. The Majaz al-Bab synagogue and the Tistal synagogue. That's the next one I want to mention right here. Then the next area is a Ben Arus area, which has a Haman Lif, located in Haman Lif. A Bit Sever Libri synagogue was over there. Now let's talk about the Bizarta area in itself. They've got the Rabbah synagogue. They've got their own great synagogue over there. They've got a synagogue in Gar El Mei, also Matuar, a synagogue, and in Menzel, Bourjuba, a synagogue, and in Raz Jebel, there happens to be a synagogue also, we have to point out. Now, let's talk about the area of Jabs over here, another famous, great Jewish community they had of yesteryear. Obviously, there's a Menzel synagogue there. There's a Bab El Bar synagogue, the Jara synagogue. So I don't know much information on each of these synagogues. I'd assume they had communities of their day over there. That's something I'll definitely have to point out. A small Jara synagogue. Then there is a Hebron synagogue. I don't know if it's related to the vernacular of Hebron or not. And another interesting name, the train station synagogue. So I'd assume maybe it was a place of location of commutation over there, because they have a name like that. Now, in El Hama there was a synagogue, and there was also the El Hama synagogue, if I'm not mistaken, and the Matama synagogue, and the Tamezeret, there was a synagogue over there also. Let's speak about the El Hama synagogue now. I think it's also known as Al Hama synagogue. This place it was a historic, non-functioning former Jewish congregation, and this I'm just reading Wikipedia here, and synagogue that was located in El Hama, in the Jabs Governorate of Tunisia. It was heavily damaged, reported by rioters during the pro-Palestinian protests during the 2023 Israel-Hamas war, which was actually quite recent, if I'm not mistaken. By 2023, the synagogue was no longer an active place, where people were davening, as there's no longer Jews over there. Now, reports over the burial site of a great 16th century Kabbalist, someone named Rabbi Yosef Ma'arawi, who I think we mentioned about before over here, was historically a Jewish pilgrimage site, we have to point out. The synagogue, unfortunately, was targeted of anti-Semitic attacks. In March 2011, I think during the Arab Spring, the synagogue's entry gate, guardhouse, a Torah scroll was damaged in an arson attack. And on the 17th of October 2023, when there was pro-Palestinian protests during the Israel-Hamas war, hundreds of rioters would set fire to the synagogue building, hammered away the building walls, and planted Palestinian flags at the site. And apparently reported over, the police did not intervene at that stage in time. They did not get involved. The Jewish Telegraph Agency described the 2023 riot as depriving Al Hama of a key vestige of its Jewish past. And the 2023 attack came 5 months after a mass shooting at the El Riba synagogue, also in Tunisia. And someone named Rafram Shaddad, who is an activist, would tell Al Monitor, a publication, in every event that Palestinians get killed, the Jews of Tunisia get attacked in turn. Apparently he calls it a ritual, which is going on over there. And the Tunisian president at the time, Kais Saied, called an emergency session of parliament after the attack, but did not condemn the attack on the synagogue. You can see the cruel anti-Semitism over there. Now, the next district where there were synagogues is the Gafsa district. There's a Shimoni synagogue of Gafsa over there. Then there's El Ghouta synagogue and the Metlau synagogue also, we have to mention about that in that district. And another district is a Jinduba Governorate. Okay, that's got the Jinduba synagogue and the Bu Salem synagogue also. I'm not sure if that was the name of the location of those places or not. More synagogues that we have to mention, right? In the Keren Governorate, there's a Karikyon synagogue, and the Hajib El Ayun synagogue also. That's one. Anyone tuning in live, welcome to our community, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, friends, and join at the moment. We are nearing at the moment, friends. We're trying to get to 8,100 subscribers, hopefully, Bezrat Hashem, by the end of next week. Let's see if we can get it. Then let's talk about the Kassain Governorate. There's Karasain synagogue, the Speitikla synagogue, and the Thalas synagogue also. And then in the Kabili Governorate, what synagogues was there? The Kabili synagogue, that's first out of one, and the Du synagogue. In the Mahdia Governorate, there's a synagogue, I think called Mahdia. In the Manuba area, there's a Tabura Tabor Bar synagogue, I believe, also. Then in the Medinine governance, you can see there were many places of Jewish locales that were based in Tunisia of yesteryear. We have to point out here. In the Medinine, there's a famous El Rida, that was Griba synagogue there. Then there's a Slat Trablesia synagogue in Er Yedach or Harasgira, if you want to be precise. And then there's Yeshiva Dijet, we're going to speak about in due course in Er Yadach, once again, in the Hara Sichra neighborhood. The Er Yadach in the Hara Sichra, it was Yeshiva HaKohenim, Yeshiva Rabbi Abraham, over there. In Er Yadach, there's a Yeshiva Jdida in Hara Sichra. In Er Yadach, there's a Slat Amram synagogue. In Er Yadach, there's Yeshiva Klifa Kohen. So that was a famous rabbinic name over there we had to point out. In Er Yada, there's Aliyat Rabbi Zaken Mazuz. Remember, Rabbi Zaken Mazuz was a famous Tunisian rabbi. I assume he was under his auspices. I haven't got much information about it. On hand, there's a Humt El Souk synagogue over there in Sla Kebira, I think that's the name of it. And the Humt El Souk or Hara Kebira that has both a Slat HaKohanim synagogue, which we'll speak about in due course, and a Slat Eliezer synagogue in Humt El Souk, also once again the Slat Rabbi Betzalel, which is in Humt El Souk, once again Hara Kibira. Once again in the same area in Hara Kibira, there's a Slat Rabbi Brahim synagogue. In the same area, the Slat Rabbi Shalom, it's pronounced not with SH, with a CH. And the Hot in Humt El Souk, once again in Hara Kibira, the Slat Hizkiah Peretz, the synagogue. I'd assume he was a rabbi there. Let's just continue over here. So we're going to learn a lot of rabbinic names over here. In the same area, in the Hara Kibira, Aliyat Ishak Huri. Remember, the Huri was a famous rabbinic dynasty in Tunisia of yesteryear. And then in the same area, once again, Aliyat Rabbi Sassi. So I'm not too sure which. I think there was a Rabbi Sassi Kohen Yonatan, if I'm not mistaken. I wonder if that was connected to him. Then the Rav Matok Hadad synagogue in the same area. The Rabbi Menachem Huri synagogue. I think we spoke about Rabbi Menachem Huri in previous case. Then the Saban synagogue in the same area happens to be, and the Prienti synagogue in Humt El Souk once again. In Medinine there was a synagogue. In Ben Gardain there was a synagogue, and in Metamyor there was also a synagogue. So you can see a place full of many synagogues in Tunisia. Now Monastir, that specific area in Tunisia, I think they boasted two synagogues in the Monastir location itself, and in Moknine location there was a synagogue there. Let's look at the Nabiul area. In Nabiul, the famous great synagogue there. And there's a Slat Karila and Mamot synagogue, the Yeshiva Gastan Karila synagogue there, the Talmud Torah synagogue in Nablus, another one, Rabbi Chai Guez synagogue. Remember we said that the Jews was a famous rabbinic family that was based in Tunisia. There was a Frame Hadad synagogue also over there, and the Baruma synagogue, Gyor synagogue, also known as, which is very interesting. Yeshiva Moshi Hadad in the same area, and the Bet Yaakov Mamor synagogue over there. And very interesting. In Menzel Buzefla there was a synagogue, and the area of Suleiman. I don't know if this is a street or the name of the synagogue itself. Let's explore the Sfax area. Let's have another famous Jewish community of yesteryear in that specific place. They had the great synagogue over there. There's a Mazuz Jeddah synagogue, Abraham Mazuz synagogue, also known as Masliya synagogue in the area. The Stika synagogue. The Hebrat Zohar synagogue, another famous one. Nachmiyat synagogue. Remember, Nachmiyat, I think, was also a rabbinic family, if I'm not mistaken. And the Zera synagogue. The Didi synagogue. There was famous Rabbi Didi, I think, from Tunisia. So I wonder if it was connected to that. The great synagogue, Bet El in Sfax. There was the Edmund Azira synagogue, and that, I think, is based once again in Sfax. The Shushan and Chamos Azraya synagogue, also in Sfax. The Gyor synagogue, once again, I'd assume, named after the famous Gyor's family. Over there, the AIU synagogue in Sfax, and the old Gender Mere synagogue also over there. Happens to be the Ankri Debi synagogue in Sfax, the Eli Bochnik synagogue, the Nataf synagogues. Remember, Nataf was a famous rabbinic family over there. The Zayton synagogue, also in Sfax in Pickville, I believe. Remember, we spoke about the Azriya Matok synagogue in Sfax in Mulniville, if I'm not mistaken, over there. Now, in the area of Suseh, and there was synagogues and Torah congregations. There was a main synagogue, there was a great synagogue there, there was a street synagogue there, the famous Keter Torah synagogue, Hai Maotai Tai synagogue, the Slat Bibi synagogue, and a synagogue in Enfida. Also, we had to point out. Now, in the Tetuan area, specific place, it was a synagogue, and a Slat Gudisha synagogue also over there. Then the Tsoyoa governorate, they would have both synagogues also, including the Ulid al-Hadef synagogue in Tuzyoa, we had to point out. Then also Rabbi Pinchas Adon synagogue also over there. Very, very interesting. And a synagogue in Nefta also in that specific locale. Now in Tunis also there was many, many synagogues. So we're just giving a list. I don't know if this all the synagogues, all the Torah institutions, but we can see there was already, we mentioned easily at least 100 or plus. And there was a great synagogue of Tunis, the El Haras synagogue in Tunis, the Bet Shalom synagogue in Tunis, or known as the Abitbol synagogue, the Beit Yaakov synagogue, Kohen synagogue, the synagogue. I think it's got interchanging names, I'm not so sure. El Hobra synagogue in Tunis. Another place was the Knesset Israel synagogue Slat Yudid, or very interesting, the Bet Sion synagogue in Tunis, Simach Sarfati synagogue of Tunis. Remember we spoke about Rabbi Simach Sarfati in the first session of the videos, if you recollect, which I recommend everyone to look into. There's also Rabbi Yeshua Bessis synagogue. Remember Yeshua Bessis synagogue. Remember we spoke about Rabbi Yeshua Bessis. I think it was his Hilula only a couple of days ago on the 9th of Tevet. He was one of the most famous Tunisian rabbis in Jewish history. And then the Nathan synagogue or Natan synagogue in Tunis, the Rabbi Chaim synagogue, and the Rabbi Hillel synagogue in Tunis. The Nessim synagogue, it's got a last name also attached to it over here. The Or Thora synagogue, or the New Hobra synagogue, also known as. And I think there's a Jema El Grana synagogue in Tunis. There's Rama synagogue. There's also a Simach Guez synagogue. Remember, the Guez was a rabbinic dynasty, which we mentioned about before here, just previously. Then Rabbi Baruch, I think Fitomi synagogue, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to double check that. Maybe I made a mistake. Then there's a Rabbi Uziel synagogue, Hacham Sapira synagogue, the Rabbi Mushi Darmon synagogue in Tunis, once again, the Brahmi synagogue, the Zdaud synagogue, the Jacob Shemla synagogue, the Abraham Sitobon synagogue. Another synagogue, can't just pronounce it here, just a list came a bit faded. Then there was a Felek Katan synagogue, the Quaid Avram Menachem synagogue, or Moshe Cohen synagogue, also known as in Tunis, the Bismuth Harhar synagogue, the Rabbi Eliyahu Naaman synagogue in Tunis, and the Abraham Arus synagogue over there. The Chamus Baruch synagogue, there's another synagogue I missed out over here, so I couldn't read again once again. The El Fassi synagogue, Rabbi Yudah Nizar synagogue, and the Zahi synagogue, the Freihai synagogue also, and then the Yosef Madar synagogue, another famous one over there that happens to be Sassi Smiler synagogue over there, the Karubi synagogue, the Saul Bobli synagogue, Abraham Lini Guar synagogue, once again you see the family name, the Guars one, the Rabbi Michael Saada synagogue, Masoud synagogue, it's got a second name to it, attached to it, the Eli Bessi synagogue, the Hay Bessi synagogue in Tunis, Solomon Hayat synagogue, the David Sitbon Berkeak synagogue, the Edward Fellow synagogue, the Hay Hayat synagogue, Yosef Parenti synagogue also, I think he was famous rabbi. There was another one, I can't pronounce the name here. And then the Rabbi Chaim Perez synagogue, the Isaac Adler synagogue, the Rabbi Yosef Fellow synagogue, Rabbi Eliyahu Kohen synagogue over there. And another one, I can't pronounce the name, I know it starts with Yaakov. Maybe Yaakov Lombraza, I have to double check on that. The Albert Furrow synagogue, the Yosef Bela Ish synagogue, also another famous one, happens to be there. The Chief Rabbi Eliyahu Borgel synagogue. Remember we spoke about the Chief Rabbi Borgel in the previous class. Abraham Gozlan synagogue, Chief Rabbi Israel Zayton synagogue. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, that might, I don't know if that was the name of all these names, I don't know if that was the name of the synagogue or that was the name of the rabbi who headed the synagogue, or maybe they named it in recognition that there was a rabbi there. Then a Yocheved synagogue, once again, I'm not too sure if that's the full title, the Bet Aaron synagogue, Yudo Mesika synagogue, the Moshi Koskas synagogue, the Sadani Baranes synagogue, apparently there was a Spinoza synagogue, the Bab El Khada Resetting synagogue, and there's also the Mushi Jacobovit synagogue, the Bismuth and Hake synagogue, the Bu Hadma synagogue in Tunis, the Buta Uzan synagogue in Tunis, Belaish and Gozlan synagogue in Tunis, Biosite synagogue, Isaac Behar synagogue in Tunis also. And the list goes on. Rabbi Chaim Uzan synagogue in Tunis, El Bratal synagogue there. There was Rabbi Mordechai Sitruk synagogue. So I think he was Sitruk was a rabbinic family also in France, if I'm not mistaken. Rabbi Mordechai Didi synagogue. Remember we spoke about the Didi family. The Bet Mordechai synagogue, the Solomon Lazari synagogue, the Community House synagogue that was in Tunis also. Okay, so we spoke about the El Riba synagogue already, just for one. Now let's speak about the Harer Sikhra synagogue. So what is it? Obviously a synagogue, I think located on the Mokhtar Atiyah Street, just north of the place Independence in the town of Eriada on the island of Jerba. I think it ceased to operate in the 1970s. There was apparently a yeshiva there also. Now, Eriada is a modern name for the ancient Jewish village of Djirit, if I'm not mistaken, over there, which became known as Harat Sekira, or let's say the small ghetto. This was in Tunisia. Jewish community would I think, or the village would decline at one stage, and the synagogue yeshiva would end up being abandoned, and the building fell into state, let's say, at the time, dilapidation at one stage in time. So I'm not too sure the whole science behind that. And the Jewish community of El Riyada, numbered around 80, is centered on El Grida synagogue, located on the southern skirts of the village, if I'm not mistaken. And I think UNESCO would announce it as a heritage site in 2023 here in Jerba. That's something we have to find out. Synagogue of the Kohanim of the Djirit. What's that? So Beit Knesset Kohanim Hadin Raita. A Beit Knesset Kohanim Hadint Riesa. There's different ways of pronouncing this synagogue in Arabic and in Hebrew. And now over there, if I'm not mistaken, it's located in the Hara Kibira. Let's say it's a greater neighborhood and a Jewish neighborhood on the outskirts of Hunt El Souk, the main town on the island of Jerba. This synagogue happens to be. And according to tradition, it was in this village where the first Jews, members of the Kohanim, were exiled from Jerusalem at the time of the destruction of the Bet Mikdash of Solomon in Jerusalem, would settle over there. And the inside, let's say, is covered very, very nicely with decorative colored tiles. The synagogue is, I think, must be distinguished also from the El Griba synagogue also. El Griba founding is also traced to the flight of priests from the destruction of the second Bet Mikdash during the siege of Jerusalem. That's something that we have to point out over here. So that's very, very interesting. Friends, anyone tuning in live, we are exploring the history within regards to the Tunisian Jewish community over here. So welcome to our community. What we're going to do at the moment is just move location at the moment. I'm just going to move to the car and continue this video at the moment. And we're going to speak more about the Jewish community over here of Tunisia and the various synagogues. I just think there's a very bad internet connection, so I actually have to move to relocate to do videos. But while we're over here together, let's just talk about what we're doing on this channel, on this series. We're recording the history of various different Jewish communities all across the world. So we happen to be on part number 4, speaking about the country Tunisia today. We happen to be speaking about, so it is very, very interesting and very informative. We spoke about more the rabbis in the previous videos, and today we happen to be speaking about the synagogues exclusively. We're going to go back to speaking about the various rabbis and what occurred during pre-World War II, World War II time period, and in the part number 5 that we're going to do. But we're just taking a short break. I'm just going to relocate, and I know that I think the internet connection was not the best over there where I was just located, so I'm just going to move to another location. And we spoke about yesterday about many, many great rabbis that there were of yesteryear in Tunisia. That's something that we have to point out over here. So we're going to continue this video at the moment. Just to relocate, friends. Actually, it's a lot warmer. Actually, recording this on a day where it happens to be very, very cold here in Israel, relatively to the rest of the year. So it's very, very interesting. And friends, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe. We're a community here, and we're exploring the history of the various different countries across the world, and great rabbis of yesteryear from all across the world, and so on and so forth. So thank God we are really able to encapsulate. We've spoken about already here in this series about our staggering 40 countries. And yes, last 3 sessions we spoke about many rabbis. We probably mentioned about at least 50 rabbis in those few days. We so far already today have listed the various different synagogues there were in Tunisia, and we can just see from this list alone the great communities there happened to be of yesteryear in Tunisia, the great rabbis. There were a lot of these synagogues that we mentioned in those different areas happen to have been named or associated with rabbi according to this Wikipedia list that we have to point out over here, so which is very, very interesting. We spoke about Rav Yoshua Basisi. I think it was his Hilula only a couple of days ago on the 9th of Tevet, if I'm not mistaken, the day before Asar B'Tevet. I recorded a video about that great rabbi yesterday. Last year, but we mentioned him yesterday, Rav Yoshua Bassis. There's actually a famous miracle that actually occurred, I think in Tunisia, while he was living. He was a grand rabbi over there, and I think there were local Arabs, Tunisians, if I'm not mistaken, that tried to trick the Jewish community during the Jewish festival of Sukkot to buy the Arbat Minim, the 4 species, at an exorbitant price. And they really tried to trick and agitate the Jewish community, something extortionate. So what he did was a miracle where I think he would buy with this, let's say, massive overinflated price, obviously done in an anti-Semitic and a rip-off kind of way. And the person told the person to come and at least, I think, maybe build a sukkah, or because I think it was also to set up a sukkah, if I'm not mistaken, and charge a fortune. So he said he's going to do it, and the guy that was building it for him, the guy that tricked him, would end up flying in the air all over that vicinity. And then I think everyone knew that God performed a miracle, especially in the schutz of the rabbi, and showed, don't mess with the Jewish people at that point in time. Unfortunately, as we mentioned in this video so far, that Tunisia has been subject to various anti-Semitic attacks over recent years, and unfortunately some of these synagogues that we happen to be speaking about here today inside this special edition was a victim of various attacks also. So very, very interesting. But we've already listed about 150 synagogues, and we know that really this was one of the most famous Jewish communities of yesteryear, the Jewish community of Jerba happened to have been. So Jerba, of Jabs, of Tunis. You can see how many synagogues we already listed over there, and there was many yeshivot. I'd like to learn more and speak maybe a special edition on the Chevrat HaTalmud yeshiva that was standing in Tunisia during those days, because that was I think that boasted many of the great rabbis were learning there, educating there also. There were rabbis, and there was like a proper strong infrastructure inside that specific locale, which is something that I very much have to point out over here. So I'm just going to park the car and we'll continue speaking about the various synagogues of Jerba over here. I'm actually just going to park this just right next to a nice archaeological hill here in the city of Bet Shemesh. That's where we happen to be. As I'll continue the video and we'll state more with regards to the history of Tunisian Jewry and the synagogue fabric and the history of the synagogues in of its own right. It's very, very interesting. Very exciting to do these videos. We're going to hopefully also record a video with regards to the Jewish community of Algeria in due course, maybe Morocco. The Morocco one, I've got a feeling, will be at least about 6 parts, if not even more. Maybe we might even get to 8 parts. Somewhere like Morocco, there's so much to say over because there were so many different cities. Just like Tunisia was very, very great of yesteryear. Also, we have to point out that Morocco definitely was also, that's something that very much had to point out. Okay, so we'll just continue this presentation now. I'm just gonna do it inside here. It's actually a lot warmer. I was outside in the freezing cold just before. Don't worry, I'll switch off the car. The Zarzis synagogue, remember that had a great Jewish community over there. It was also known as a Beit Knesset, Mishkan Yaakov, and its Jewish congregation located in coastal town of Zarzis in Tunisia. I think the synagogue was completed in the year 1905, and the Jewish community of Zarzis at that point in time would be as many as 1,000 people. Unfortunately, an arson attack took place in 1982 following the Sabra and Shatila massacre in Lebanon, and it left the synagogue and Torah scrolls totally destroyed. It was subsequently rebuilt and used by the town's remaining 150 Jews. I think it was a decorated synagogue lavishly, leading into an open-air courtyard, and I think there was adjoining rooms which serve as a Talmud Torah over there. Now, I think as of 2007, Rabbi Eliyahu Sofer was the head of the community. We're going to speak more about the current rabbis maybe in 2 parts' time, I believe. The Manusa synagogue, another famous synagogue, I think on the west of Zarzis in Tunisia. It's in the village of Munusa, if I'm not mistaken. I think all these synagogues were Orthodox, if I'm not mistaken. I know there was an influence of the Alliance that came in. I don't know if that's, well, maybe we'll investigate more tomorrow. Now, the synagogue, together with the nearby Jewish cemetery, is all that remains of the Jewish community of the village after obviously, the Jewish exodus was take place from Tunisia after the attacks of 1967. Now, another synagogue that we can speak about over here is the Keter Torah synagogue of Susa. Now, I think it's located in the city of Susa, in the Susa governorate of Tunisia. So I think, obviously, I had a large Tunisian Jewish community dating from the Punic period, we have to point out. And as of 1853, 400 Jewish families lived in Susa, which is a very modest and sizable amount. I think it's in this context that Keter Torah synagogue was built in 1913 under the initiative of another great rabbi we mentioned about yesterday, Rabbi Yosef Giaz, who was a chief rabbi of Susa and the first native Tunisian chief rabbi. And synagogue, I think, is the main synagogue in this specific city. I think in 1946, after the Second World War, the Jewish community in Susa numbered as many as 3,500, but would continue to decrease. So it was quite a big community there. And as of 2006, 20 years ago, with 36 Jews left in Susa, Susa once had 6 synagogues. I think now only Keter Torah is operational, if I'm not mistaken. And on the December the 6th, in the year 2019, the National Heritage Institute of Tunisia would announce that the synagogue was placed on the list of heritage sites of the Islamic World Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. That's something we had to point out. I'm going to speak about Rabbi Yosef Giaz. I know we spoke about him yesterday just to get a bit of Chazara. He lived between 1860 to 1934 and was the Grand Rabbi of Tunisia. He served in Sousse between 1906 and 1928, then in Tunis between 28 to 1934, and he would serve as Grand Rabbi of Tunisia until he passed away. He was the grandson of Rabbi Yosef Giaz, also with the same name, whose name he received according to Sephardic tradition. He is the son of Rabbi Chaim David Giaz and a direct descendant, I believe, of the chief Rabbi David Giaz, who was, I think, a Talmudist back in North Africa, if I'm not mistaken. And he belongs to a famous rabbinical dynasty, obviously dating back to the 17th century. He would found the Keter Torah, and I think currently it's the only synagogue that is functioning in Sousse, as we mentioned about before. And there's various different stories were collected in the year 1990 about him and put inside a book. And he himself is the author of several books and manuscripts, including a collection of halachic decisions, I think called the Yagen Hashem, if I'm not mistaken. 1931, a manual of preparation for the Bar Mitzvah of the Grand Rabbinate of Tunis. And between 1903 to 1908, various sermons, if I'm not mistaken, will come back during his tenure as rabbi in the cities of Madia and Susa, between 1903 to 1908. Now, the Grand Synagogue of Tunis, another famous one, also known as the Great Synagogue of Tunis or the Temple of Osiris. And this happens to be known as, I think it's located on the Avenue de la Liberté in Tunis, if I'm not mistaken, in Tunisia. I think the idea for this specific synagogue was originally requested by the 19th century Italian Jewish statesman Giacomo di Castelnuovo. And finally, I think it was established in the year 1937 by a specific French architect, someone last name Valenci, who chose to design it in the Art Deco style. And the synagogue was shut down by Nazi Germany during the German occupation of Tunisia, but would resume operations after the country was liberated by Allied forces. Now, post-World War II, let's talk about that time period over there with regards to this synagogue. I think in 1967, anti-Jewish rioters would come in. They were obviously motivated by the Six-Day War at the time. They trashed, looted the synagogue, unfortunately, and burned and destroyed the sacred Torah scrolls. And this resulted in the abandonment of the building. And in the 1990s, Zain El Abidin Ben Ali funded the building's restoration, reported over. So I don't know much information about him. And in 2011, Islamic extremist rioters would attack the synagogue and damage it, and would chant very, very bad things. Now, there was Tariq Ahmad, Baron Ahmad of Wimbledon, visited the Grand Synagogue during a 2-day visit of Tunisia in early July 2022. And on June 2022, I think on the 24th of that month, a person ran towards the synagogue and sadly stabbed two officers, reported, lightly injuring them. Authorities identified the stabbing as a terrorist attack and said its perpetrator had previously been arrested on terrorism. So see, they didn't take tough enough action on him, obviously. Another synagogue there, the Or Torah synagogue. So what is that, friends? I think Or Torah synagogue, obviously, that's how we will call it. A former synagogue, obviously, located in Hara in Tunis and was established in the 1930s. And the synagogue, I think, ceased to operate, I think, during the Six-Day War in 1967. So you can see the Six-Day War had an impact within regards to the standings of various synagogues. And I think after the departure of most Tunisian Jews for Israel and France following anti-Jewish riots after the Six-Day War in 1967, included the burning of Torah scrolls at that point in time, and religious services stopped being offered at the synagogue, and I think it's currently not in use, if I'm not mistaken. There are ongoing discussions, let's say, among the Tunisian Jewish community and the residents of the Hafsiyah to turn the Or Torah synagogue into a museum of the Hara, with a project led by someone named Leila Ben Gakem, a team of architects from the NGO, if I'm not mistaken, with the aim to save the synagogue from total degradation. So I'm not sure much about it. Then another synagogue, the Bet Mordechai synagogue, La Golette. I think it's a synagogue, also known as a hospital synagogue, a Jewish congregation, and the synagogue located in Roy Khaz Nadar in La Golette, a suburb in Tunis, in Tunisia. I think it was donated to the community by the community's members Isaac Bassis in the 1910s and was designed by Italian architect Benoit Barsotti and included neoclassical and orientalist, let's say, elements in the design of the building, acroteria, columns, corniches, and access to the synagogue involved going through a passage that leads to the building facade. Above the front door of the building, I think, are stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. And inside the sanctuary is a square room centered around four pillars, which one supporting a Ezrat Nashim women's section, if I'm not mistaken, and a skylight before renovations in the 1980s replaced it with a portico above the Torah Ark. And I believe the building was reconstructed in 1995 after the roof collapsed in 1994. Now the synagogue, the Keren Yeshua synagogue, or synagogue Keren Yeshua. It's in Tunis, in La Marsa suburb of Tunis, if I'm not mistaken. It was founded in 1923, so just over 100 years ago, and named Keren Yeshua after local philanthropist Yeshua Savoy Kishoy. He provided land for the synagogue building. The keystone was placed in 1925, and the synagogue itself was opened and consecrated in 1927. This synagogue, over the course of its history, saw generations of Tunisian Jews pray, celebrate life cycle events, welcome numerous rabbis, visitors, Talmidei Chachamim scholars, and I think it's one of the pieces of Tunisian Jewish heritage, and very highly respected apparently by the local Muslim community. And it's a center to Jewish community in La Marsa, and it has a Jewish elementary school reported over on the site since the beginning of the 1980s. Due to, let's say, I think there was a decrease in the number of congregants, the synagogue closed its doors except for during the summer, if I'm not mistaken, when Jewish tourists visit the area of there for vacation. Someone named Isaac Calfon is a current official who is responsible for the building, we had to point out over here. So very, very interesting. I think it's also known as Synagogue of Miracles because the synagogue survived several close encounters with destruction during the Second World War, the occupation of Tunisia. We have to point out there was, and was saved by bombardment by American planes, if I'm not mistaken, over there. And the seat of the local commandant was only 10 meters from the synagogue in the Hotel Zafir. And I think there's a legend that the pilot saw the Star of David from the dome of the synagogue and adjusted his trajectory to avoid it. The bombs fell on the Safsaf district, about 200 meters from the synagogue. And after liberating Tunisia, Jewish allied soldiers, I believe, came to pray in the synagogue. And there's photos of which remain preserved in the synagogue's archives. Reports over. In 1994, the synagogue was damaged by severe winter weather, which led to the collapse of the dome and structural danger to the rest of the building. Those responsible for the synagogue, in collaboration with the congregants, saved the building despite calls from the municipality and the larger Tunisian Jewish community to demolish the building. Now, thanks to financial contributions, especially by private committee of congregants, the synagogue was therefore restored to its original state. 2007, the building celebrated its 80th anniversary, I believe. Interesting enough. So let's talk about Rabbi Yom Tov Kalfon. He lived between 1899 to 1977. I think he was a key member, let's just say, of a spiritual leader of the synagogue, officiated and administrator of the synagogue from 1927 all the way to 1977. The rabbi was a member of the Jewish community of Tunis, was known for his, let's say, erudition as well as his engagement with larger community, especially on social action. The rabbi continued the work of Rabbi Chaim Belashi and Yechibe Hebrat Atalmud, which is located in Belash's former home. And I think the synagogue still exists there today. Rabbi Kalfon twice refused to take the role of chief rabbi of Tunisia, letting all the rabbis take the role ahead of himself. Nevertheless, when he was 41, he would take the role. And the rabbi was also known for his good relations with other religious committees, especially the Muslim community. Due to diverse roles, Rabbi Kalfon became an emblematic figure, I believe, in Tunisian Judaism and in the life of the Lad Marsa synagogue. I think since he passed away in 1977, if I'm not mistaken, his son Isaac has maintained the synagogue's building and officiates it every summer, so you can see real heritage over there. So friends, I think this is a good place to leave it over here. And yeah, we spoke about various different synagogues here today. We're going to go back in the next session and speak more about the Jewish community history that there was of yesteryear all throughout Tunisia, especially the Second World War time period, and so on and so forth. As yeah, we really making huge strides and progress here inside the series. Friends, we record a lot of videos here on this channel. This is about the 40th country we explored. It's part number 4 we are in already. So please, I'm urging everyone to join our community with all the fantastic content we've got. We also record biography video of many great rabbis that there were of yesteryears through all different North African, Asian countries, and so on and so forth. We've really spoken about many great rabbis of yesteryear. So I would very much recommend everyone to actually join our community and subscribe to the channel, please, now, and enjoy and take advantage of all the fantastic content that we have available, friends. So wishing you all a fantastic day. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel also, and watch over the previous 3 videos we did about Tunisia also, and watch your space for more fantastic content. We record videos on the daily page of the Talmud also, and various other, let's say, important topics of its own right. So a lot to be excited for, and to progress for, and to educate for over here on our channel. And one other exciting thing we do over here is we tour all over Israel, we have to point out. So that's another very exciting project of ours. So yeah, so thanks for watching, everyone. I like to go to different places on every class, and to make it more exciting, and so on and so forth. So take care and be well, and thanks for watching. Thank you.